Hello everyone. I hope you all are doing well. In this session, we will discuss on economic externalities, and as we are slowly moving and discussing issues related to market structures associated with healthcare and how healthcare may not be an ideal market, and in which context we move towards the market imperfection, and while we were doing about the transition or movement of the a perfect market or an ideal market to a market imperfection in terms of a healthcare system, we discussed about externality in our last class, and I gave you a broad idea about what is externality and where these benefits and costs come together, but not in the best efficient manner. So when I say this efficient manner, that means externality has something to do with efficiency, economic efficiency. What is externality? By its definition. So we'll discuss about economic externalities, and an externality is a cost or a benefit. It can be a cost as well as a benefit that arises from either production or consumption of a particular goods and services, and falls upon someone else apart from the consumer. First we have talked about producer, so producer or consumer themselves, or I will say it, consumer itself. That means that when a producer or a consumer, they produce or consume something, it can be in terms of production, it can be in terms of consumption. When they produce something, there are certain implications, like when I produce something, I have some benefit, also I have some cost. And because I am producing something, it can have a benefit upon someone else, it can also have a cost upon someone else, right? This benefit and cost, which is eventually not benefit the others as well, not cause any cost to others, not incur any cost to others, but it is eventually doing so, then that additional benefit and cost upon those others are known as externalities. Yes, now it can be from the production, it can be as well from the consumption. Say if I consume something, then because of my consumption there can be an implication, because I am consuming something, someone else can be benefited, or someone else can also be equally or more or lesser, something can also be incurring a cost because of my consumption. Let us understand the types of economic externalities. So the first one is negative externality. Which imposes a cost. The next one is positive externality. As the name suggests, it imposes, or it should not be imposes, it causes benefit or results into benefits, right? So this is the basic difference. Positive causes benefit, negative causes cost, and then we have total in terms of, now we have just said positive and negative. This positive and negative can arise out of the production externality, production as well as consumption. So, now I am attaching this production and consumption with this. So, the 4 types of economic externalities are: one is negative production externality, two maybe negative consumption externality, 3 positive production externality, 4 positive consumption externality. Now, as the name suggests, negative externality, that means cost is higher. Negative externality, that means cost is higher again. But on the first point, the cost is being imposed, because of this production. In the second condition, the cost is being imposed because of anyone's consumption. We will take examples and then understand it on a better way. Similarly, a positive externality is which causes benefit. Now, this benefit can arise because of production as well as consumption. Therefore, if a particular production causes us a benefit, or not to the, again, not to that particular person who is producing that, apart from him or her, if this is actually bringing any benefit to others, then that is a positive production externality. And if because of somebody's consumption of something and it brings benefit, it results into benefit towards somebody, then it is a positive consumption externality. We will learn about all of these in taking examples. Let us say one is negative production externality. Negative production externality. What can be the easiest example is a polluting industry. It can be an industry, it can be a polluting firm, yes, a particular firm which is causing air pollution in a certain locality. They are manufacturing, say it is a paper industry, it is a cement industry, highly polluting industries. So, they are manufacturing their paper or cement, or say if paint industry, then it causes a different kinds of water pollution mainly. So, in terms of air pollution, let us say. So, what is happening is that because of their production, they are earning their profit, they are selling their products, earning profit, reinvesting the capital or the profit and continuing their business growth. What is happening because of their production or production process? It actually degrading or deteriorating the air condition in the nearby areas. And even if those who are staying nearby, they don't use the papers manufactured in that particular industry, or they don't use the cements manufactured in that particular industry, but they are consuming or inhaling that poor air because of that production. Yes. So, the production itself has a cost, right? Production itself has a cost, that is the firm's cost, production cost, whatever. Production itself has a benefit because of that products outputs. So, this is all private benefit and private cost, right? Now, there is no social benefit as such, because they are not consuming their products, nothing good is happening. On the contrary, the quality of air is going down, because of which maybe many people around that factory are falling sick with acute respiratory infections, asthmatic problems, bronchitis, this and that, lung infection. So they have to go to a doctor, they have to treat themselves. So eventually what is happening? Their cost is increasing, right? And this cost is external cost, right? So because of this polluting industry or that particular farm, there is some external cost is being incurred by somebody else or a group of people, and that is external cost. It basically happens when that there is a unregulated market, because an unregulated market will not generally have a their profit motive will be very high, and then they really will not have a intention to really bother about the causes they are costs they are bringing into towards the society, or any negative adversities because of their products. So and because it's unregulated, they have a market power, and that leads to an inefficiency into that market. Eventually this negative externality is very, very common. So the second one is negative consumption externality. Now, what is the best example of negative consumption externality is basically smoking cigarette, and the causes and which causes harm for the passive smokers, right? I smoke a cigarette, I pay for it, so that's my private cost. I pay for a cigarette, I smoke that, and that is my benefit, private benefit, my own benefit. But the child who is standing beside me, yes, or the people who is standing beside me, or if I smoke within there are these advertisement nowadays, right, against the smoking causes cancer and all this, and they show that father is smoking and then the child are coughing, so within the room, inside the room he is smoking, and then it has, after being exposed for a long time towards this passive smoking, it has a serious negative impact on the other's health, passive smokers' health. Therefore, because of my consumption, or because of that person's consumption of cigarette, is causing a health problem to those who didn't want to consume, didn't want to inhale the smoke, but are incurring a cost, health cost. Eventually it can be anything, it can be this externality can be accommodated into environmental and energy economics, natural resource economics and all. Anyways, so this negative consumption externality therefore is the cost caused to somebody else because of somebody the consumer's own private consumption. So it is like smoking a cigarette causes respiratory infection to the passive smokers, and this polluting industry of farm which pollutes air, causing lung infection among the closer by residents. Yeah, so these are the the most prominent examples maybe in terms of negative production externality and negative consumption externality. When we move towards the positive production externality and positive consumption externality, first let us take the positive production externality. So in positive externality it causes benefit, right? Positive production externality means the benefit is being caused out of production of something. Externality means the benefit for somebody else. Now, let us say there is a hospital coming up in our locality, and because of that hospital, the city civic body, they have rule or regulation that in front of the hospital, the road, it should be a both way lane, and then the road breadth will be something around 40 feet or something like that, minimum 40 feet, something like that. So if it is like that, then the hospital has to, or either let's take the hospital has to take the initiative, because it's a private hospital, yeah? And they can only get the sanction from the government if they expand the road on their own cost in front of them, at least 100 meters both the sides. So the upcoming hospital, private hospital, expand the roads in front of it, but those who are using those roads, or those who stay closer by, take that road towards their office, or back, or towards the children's school or back, they don't probably visit that particular hospital. Many of them can go to a clinic, many of them have other alternative options, but then they are taking the road, they are using the road, and they are being benefited because of that expansion of the road, right? So the hospital expanded the road for its own functioning, for its own production of healthcare services, and it incurred its own private cost, right? That is its infrastructural cost to start their business. Eventually what happens is this expansion of roads causes benefit, roads in front of it, and that benefits the usual commuters, or maybe those who are staying nearby, right? Maybe they are not taking their vehicle, they are just walking down the street, they have not paid a single penny, but because there is no traffic congestion, and at the same time they are also enjoying the hospital, at least the security of having the hospital, that is the satisfaction side, right, utility side. So they have a benefit, of course, and that is that positive production externality. What can be the positive consumption externality is, say there is a high prevalence of a particular flu, yeah, or say swine flu or something, which was very prevalent in Bangalore sometimes back, maybe last year, and this is infectious, contagious, this swine flu. So and many of the people, they were taking the swine flu vaccinations voluntarily. Now if I take that vaccination, I paid for that, yeah, some 800 rupees or something, I paid for that, I paid for the doctor and all, and then I got the flu. It's completely preventive measure. I even don't know that whether I would have even affected by the swine flu or not. It's just a preventive measure, right? Maybe I got exposed to a swine flu person, and then the swine flu vaccine enters my body, and then because I have that flu, I have that vaccination, the flu never becomes positive, right? And that eventually saves the health for those who are coming in touch to me, or those who are staying around me. Maybe they have not taken the flu, right? So I have consumed the flu, and because of that I am stopping the transmission of the problem, at least through me. Therefore it has a positive consumption externality. So the example is taking a swine flu vaccine and eventually as a preventive cause. So, if I am not falling sick with swine flu, that is my private benefit as a preventive cause, which eventually stops transmission of the virus through me to the others who haven't taken the vaccine, right? So, this is my positive consumption externality. Now, generally whenever we talk about this positive externality, negative externality, we say that in one case the cost is more, in other case the benefit is more. When the it's positive externality, then we talk about the benefit. When it's negative externality, we talk about the cost. But every single thing has its own private cost, its own private benefit. Maybe it can have both this social cost and social benefit. So, what happens that when we estimate this the cost and benefit, it's not basically a cost benefit analysis, but of course yes, when we estimate the cost and benefit, we will break it in two components. Yeah. So, as we have said that it has always a private cost and private benefit, apart from that it has another component, that is that externality, right? We call that external cost or external benefit, right? So, private cost are those which is incurred for a production or consumption of any goods and services to the producer or consumer, of course respectively, themselves or himself. Yes, so the private cost is those cost which is incurred for a production or consumption of any particular goods and services to the producer or consumer himself. Now, similarly, private benefit is those benefit which is incurred or which is enjoyed, instead of incurred, while we are talking about benefit, which is enjoyed for a production or consumption of a particular good by the, over here in case of to the, it should be by the producer or consumer themselves. This is about private cost and private benefit. What about social cost and social benefit? Social cost is simply the total cost which includes private cost and external cost. Similarly, social benefit is the one which includes total benefit, which is total benefit includes the private benefit and external benefit. Now, what is external cost and external benefit? It is very simple. external cost and external benefit are the cost and the benefit upon the others apart from the producer or consumer. Yes. So, together we estimate the social cost. So, the social cost can be a summation of private cost plus external cost. Similarly, social benefit is private benefit plus external benefit. But when we estimate this, if you remember that our demand curve and supply curve are all drawn or estimated in terms of the marginal cost, marginal benefit or marginal returns, right, diminishing marginal returns, and that is how we estimate our supply curve and demand curve. And when we are talking about economic efficiency, or economic externality under the light of economic efficiency or inefficiency, then it is important that we talk about the market equilibrium, because whenever there is efficiency, because externality is often considered as an economic efficient condition where the equilibrium is not properly achieved, or the output, at least the price in the output is not probably the best one or the socially most desirable one. And the challenge to estimate this external benefit and external cost is the information asymmetry, because often people do not know that whether a particular industry, they are polluting my environment or not, or even if they are polluting my environment, how badly it is affecting me. Yes, so and therefore the attaching the cost to this is very, very difficult, yeah, because of this unawareness. Eventually in a unregulated market, because the government doesn't really come forward, or hasn't yet come forward to take a decision or to work upon those polluting or socially undesirable or inefficient producer or consumer, then certainly it is difficult again to measure by a single individual that, okay, I think that they are doing something wrong, but I can't really do anything, right. So, so the estimate of this external cost and external benefit has often been challenging, and thus the estimation, a perfect estimation of social cost and social benefit. Having said that, this when we try to kind of draw this in map, and as we know that the supply curve is kind of synonymous to this marginal cost, not literally but still, then a marginal cost, and we know this a marginal cost curve goes up, it's if it is a curve, then probably it should look like something like this, all right, and which passes through the average cost curve in its minimum point, right. So here we will take these marginal cost curves as something like this, where 0 means no output and my marginal cost curves goes up whenever I start producing, yeah, and over here I have cost. So this is my marginal cost curve, and so often these marginal cost curves, when you draw the first one little steep, and you can just call it MPC, marginal private cost, not marginal propensity to consume or something. So marginal private cost, or just keep MC, marginal cost, yeah. So that is the private cost. Of course, when we talk about marginal cost, we talk about only the cost out of the production process or the inputs. Yeah. So, the marginal private cost, and whenever we have this marginal private cost and we have an externality, and if it is a case of a polluting industry or a negative production externality, or eventually a negative consumption externality, then there is an external cost. So, when there is no production, the external cost is 0, and because nothing is being produced, so there is no harm actually. So, otherwise the moment it starts producing, it starts polluting the industry or the environment, the industry starts polluting, and therefore it should be marginal social cost. Yeah, and this difference between the marginal private cost and marginal social cost should be the marginal external cost. This difference is the, say, this difference is the marginal external cost, because together MPC and MEC, this vertical difference, yeah, together this MPC and MEC gives this MSC, like marginal social cost. Now, what happens is, when I have my demand curve which comes out of the benefit, and then how I can draw my demand curve, again the benefit, that is primarily because it is a downward sloping and because of a diminishing marginal utility. So, I will draw my demand curve as like this. So, you can call it a demand curve, but do not write it like this, you can call it a marginal social benefit. Yeah. Why? You can eventually keep it as marginal private benefit, or you can keep it as a marginal social benefit. It hardly matters, because over here the external benefit is so low as compared to the external cost. So, the marginal private, the difference between the marginal private benefit and marginal social benefit, very low. So, and then they are similar, because marginal external benefit is low. So, what happens when we don't realize that there is a marginal social cost, there is a marginal external cost? So, the producer will produce at this point Q prime, so they will produce at this point, and we'll keep, now we'll talk about, now this is a kind of demand and supply, this is a kind of market. So, apart from cost and probably benefit, yeah, I will also keep price here, and then the price, when the external cost hasn't been considered, the price is like what the inefficient market or eventually the polluting industry says, is not a P star, is P prime. So, initially they will produce here. The moment we have this marginal social cost, yes, now the equilibrium should be social cost and social benefit. Yes. Now, even if I don't have this marginal social benefit, marginal social cost, I haven't yet realized that I have a marginal social cost. So, naturally there is, I really don't know that, marginal external cost. So, I don't know that how far that marginal social cost will be there, and till how far we can bargain, or the government can impose a regulation that you cannot produce more than that, or you have to, and then there should be a price regulation which pushes the cost. We'll learn about that. So, the equilibrium is here. The moment it's like this, marginal social cost, then the equilibrium is here at this point, Q star, which raises the cost as well as the price, isn't it? P star, it raises the cost. as well as the price. Why it raises the cost? Before going to this, I will tell you something about this particular area. This area is known as deadweight loss. This particular area is known as deadweight loss. Deadweight loss eventually can also be considered as excess burden when there is excess surplus or excess burden, or can be called as an allocative inefficiency. Yeah, this particular area. And whenever we have a deadweight loss, because eventually if I don't realize that my marginal social cost is here, and then I am creating a production which is socially not desirable at all, this particular area, because I have to produce on that Q star, I am manufacturing at Q prime, and then my price should be over here, but if I manufacture at this point, but it is not over here, and then there is an excess surplus because the supply is more, and there is an excess burden because that is not socially desirable, and then if that is having a high external cost which leads to this market inefficiency called deadweight loss, then what we will do, the government has to bring a regulation. What they do, they can impose a tax. And here the government has to regulate. So yeah, so government regulations come in, so they can eventually bring kind of property rights. Yes, they can impose a tax. They can impose kind of or say the consumers bargaining ability. It's not directly from the government, but government can always pitch in and moderate over this bargaining ability. We'll talk about under Coase theorem. Yes, and there can also be a transaction costs, what government may ask these polluting industries to pay. Let us see. So slowly we will go one by one. So what happens in terms of this production when we have a property right? That means that when we have a property right, this particular industry or this particular firm doesn't really have any property right, means they are not regulated, they don't have a right to operate, they are not under the government's control, or they are under the supervision or monitoring framework. So and they can work on their own wish, because as long as the government is not intervening or interfering. So the importance of the property right is to introduce a kind of, or to establish a kind of authorization on that particular industry or the firm, so that their operations become more legal and comes under the framework, or the legal framework, or under the scrutiny of the authority, and then they are supposed to abide by certain rules and regulations. And when they are certain, they have to abide by the rules and regulations, then they cannot really overproduce, and then because they cannot overproduce, and that means that they are eventually reducing the cost, and they can certainly increase the price to make over on their the loss in terms of the quantity, because it will certainly increase the price. And because they have a property right, they may go for certain certifications, certain which additionally has some cost. But if there is a and then if they accept that yes, my firm is polluting the environment, then and having a property right, it is their responsibility to pay for the cost, you know, to pay for the or to bear the cost of pollution or the polluting the environment. So once they bear the cost of polluting the environment, so naturally the price goes up, you know, and then this price is equal to the external cost. So whenever there is a property right, and in that case the cost of pollution, which is basically borne by the polluter, is equal to the marginal external cost. Of course, cost of pollution of per unit of production, yeah. So marginal external cost, and naturally when the price goes up, there is again the surplus falls down, and then the demand increases, because from here the price goes up, so the demand falls, and when the demand falls there is an excess surplus, is again excess supply, and so there is again a bargaining, because they cannot really increase the price by a lot of margin, increasing the surplus. At the same time, because of this taking care of this pollution, maybe the demand also doesn't fall a lot. So there is a consensus at this point where the property rights bring a stability, and that is the equilibrium, yeah, that is the efficient production. So at Q star and then the P star is the price. Similarly, the next one is Crow's theorem. It is it is propounded by Professor Coase. It's a very interesting theorem. Coase theorem. So what Professor Coase says, he says just few points. Number one, if property right exists, yeah. Number two, only a small number of parties involved, like say the industry or the firm, and then only few people around of parties involved. Number three, low transaction cost. Then all these can lead to an efficient production. Yeah, through bargaining. Through bargaining. So what happens when there is the production cost, I mean the transaction cost is low, and only a few members are involved, so there is no chaos and not many decisions. If there are not too many decisions, then it is easier to take a decision, and the delay is not much, so the transaction cost overall goes down, and the property right is there. That means the industry accepts that they are polluting, but they are ready to pay for that. So what happens is that those people around the industry, they go, they approach them, they have a discussion, and the industry pays exactly that amount as a compensation towards these people, either their health cost or some compensation towards the people of those who are affected, and then that the compensation is exactly equal to the external cost, and then of course marginal external cost means with every unit of production what is the additional compensation they require. That is the compensation, not only average compensation, it is an incremental compensation. Yeah, so that is the estimation part, that how much extra, if they produce one more unit, how much extra they have to pay as a compensation to those people who are being affected. So this is a Coase theorem, yeah. But when there are too many parties involved, or the cost is really high, then the industry may deny to pay for that, number one, and number two, additionally what can happen, that the consensus, bringing the consensus is also very difficult. So over there the government pitches in, so when the government pitches in, that means government takes a stand or a decision when transaction cost is high and number of parties and a large number of parties, number of stakeholders. Yes. So, and that means when the transaction cost of is low, then only this cost theorem is applicable. So, only these three conditions. One is the private cost, the transaction cost is low, they have this property right, and number three is that only few members are involved. So it often happens with a polluting industry. It happens with a for a regulatory firm, a realtor estate, or somebody maybe a dam, or somebody establishing a dam which has a serious negative impact on but a few people, those who are surviving around that area, cultivating or something, so that can have a serious impact on their livelihood. So it's like that. So the next one can be when we talk about the and eventually this, when this government takes care, when the cost theorem doesn't work out, then we can name them as government charges, some taxes, and then we can name them emission charges, right? Emission charges. Or government can eventually ask them for a marketable permit, yeah. Eventually ask them to go for a marketable permit. That means you can maximum produce or manufacture till this many unit, or this is your maximum allowed amount of production. Before this, you can maximum market this much. Before that, you cannot market in a particular given time period. So even if you manufacture, they are not going to get going to see the daylight. So it's like that. So another way the government can deal with this, or the system can deal with this, is imposing these emission charges or a tax directly, right? And this tax, often known as Pigovian tax. Under Professor Pigou, yeah, this is known as Pigovian tax. So what Pigovian tax says, that it is very simple, marginal private cost plus that amount of tax together is marginal social cost, right? So this tax, again, as the transaction cost, as the permit, the property right, not the permit, the property right, to get that property right there, they have to spend something, they have to pay something, or certification or something like that, or some treatment plant they have to get. So that has a cost, right? So that is one. Otherwise, if they don't have a treatment plant, they don't have to get the property right. So all this, and then this tax, or this the consumer's bargaining ability, that transaction cost, everybody is equals to this external cost, right? Marginal external cost, and that's how it is estimated, that what will be the tax amount, what will be the emission charges, and how best you can work out, or how best you can identify the external cost, and that you're working out of the taxes or the emission charges, or whichever these mechanisms are, will be efficient. And therefore, when we look at this this diagram, yeah, so this is the, in case of tax, this is again the amount of tax, right? And again, because of this tax, in property right, they are taking care of this price, the transaction cost is this cost, but because of this tax, again the price is increased from here to here, but the quantity is decreased, right, from here to here. Now we will discuss about the external benefit. So, what happens in case of external benefit is, again, as in case of benefit we talk about the positive externality, and whenever we are talking about positive externality, our demand curve or our benefit curve will shift, not the cost curve, because the marginal external cost for that for that particular production or consumption is too low. So, just what we have seen in our previous diagram, it goes like this. So, we had a social cost curve and then the social benefit curve. So, when we have a social cost curve something like this, marginal social cost, and then we can have a marginal social benefit curve, right? I mean, sorry, first one is marginal private benefit curve, right? You can write MB as well, marginal private benefit, and this is your quantity, this is your cost, benefit, and finally the price. Yes, and at that point where your marginal, you were just thinking about your marginal private benefit, it eventually intersects, finds the equilibrium in the intersects with the marginal social cost, and this is my Q prime and this is my P prime. But unlike our negative externality, we where it was a polluting and then it has a external cost. So, and then to bring down the level of cost, external cost, or to bring towards an efficient equilibrium or efficient output, we had to decrease the quantity so that the pollution or this external cost, total external cost, is reduced, and then the dead weight loss is vanished. That inefficient part is vanished. Similarly, over here, as it has a benefit, it should not be underproduced, right? So, the society should get more and more benefit out of that particular production or consumption. So, whenever there is a benefit, the best example is, which is the fundamental example, as a person who cultivates bee, and then those bees actually go to pollinate the nearby farmers' farms or plants. So, those who is having the bee or the bee cultivator or the honey maker, his business is actually bringing a positive benefit or a benefit towards those farmers, because they don't have to pay anything to pollinate their plants, So, but if they don't find any motivation, any subsidies, compensation, any remuneration against that their business is helping others' business, they feel demotivated, and then they will keep their production at a very low level, because their honeys are going out, and maybe that also affects their business. So, over here again they can work out a plan that they give some incentive, pay some money to this particular person, like the farmers pay the honey maker, and then he finds the motivation, or the government says, oh my god, it's fantastic, because now they don't have to use any particular fertilizer, it's a natural process, it's good in terms of health. So, let us pay this person, and then let me encourage him to increase his potential of honeys or number of bees from 100 to maybe 500. So, in that way, the marginal private benefit, if there is a marginal external benefit, should be a curve which is above the marginal social benefit, and this difference is this vertical difference is my marginal external benefit. Yes. Therefore, now you can see that because of this marginal social benefit and marginal private benefit, what is happening? Marginal social benefit and marginal social cost, what is happening? Now they are finding a new equilibrium, right, over here, which increases the output. So, this equilibrium is the efficient equilibrium, and because of this equilibrium, maybe the price goes up, because of the price, because even if the price goes up, but they can eventually make up for this dead weight loss, because this is the level of inefficiency. This is the deadweight loss. This is the amount of output which is contributing towards this deadweight loss, right? And this is the difference between the benefit, external benefit and external cost. Social benefit and private benefit, which is upon the social cost, of course, in the initial output level, equilibrium level, and this external benefit level is actually, and this external benefit level multiplied by with this, the difference of the inefficient and efficient output is actually the total deadweight loss. And eventually how this particular scenario can be improved is, or an efficient output can be achieved, primarily the government's action. As giving subsidies, public provisions, that okay, fine, you do this, I will give you a market, or I will buy your products as a government. So they give a fair price, so government says I will buy your product, but you just increase the scale. That's what they do. And for many say organizations, then they can give them, or in terms of subsidies, the tax exemption or subsidies, that's what they are doing for these startups, small startups, or the patents and copyrights. Because they are innovating something which has a strong societal implication. You continue this innovation, and then I will give you the right to sell that product for 10 years. So this patent and copyrights again will help them. So 10 years means having a kind of monopoly, and which helps them to expand in that market. And when they can expand in that market, so they can gain a market, build a market for them. So there is naturally a higher output, and slowly the social benefit is actually being achieved by that. So similarly, in case of a public provision, the authority, the public authority or the government, which receives the payment from the government, the public authority means that the producer is getting a payment from the government, and then they are saying, fine, I am paying for you, and then you have to produce this much for me, and the government estimates this Q star amount, and then says that you have to increase your production from here to here, and for this I will make the payment. So it's a kind of a motivation, of course, for this particular government, for this particular organization, which has to move towards the efficient output. Eventually, there can be a condition where if my marginal social cost is something like this, and maybe this is my marginal social benefit, and the marginal social cost, if it can also shift, or if it is my marginal cost, it can also shift, it will increase, and maybe I have a marginal private benefit, it can also increase. But then you need to estimate that which is more, marginal private benefit is more, or marginal social cost is more. Marginal social benefit is more, or marginal social cost is more. Eventually, which is that, the externality for the benefit or for the cost, which is more, and based on that you will estimate whether you will estimate marginal social cost and marginal social benefit, or you will manufacture in marginal private cost and marginal private benefit. If considering the external cost and the external benefit is positive, then you have to decide that which way you will go. Or the government has to decide that how things should work, whether I will tax them or I will subsidize them. Yes, so this is all about the externality, economic externality, and then we see that how in case of benefit we increase our output towards the efficiency, and how in case of cost we decrease the output towards the efficiency. Of course, just by understanding the amount of external cost and external benefit, and then either giving a subsidy equal to external benefit, or a provision, or a patent, or give a property right, or a emission charge, or some transaction cost, or Pigouvian tax equal to external cost, so that it comes back towards a efficient output, where the social cost and social benefit is actually bringing you the equilibrium, not the private cost and private benefit. Thank you very much.